blood.
Why are you so... Oh, that's no blood?
Yeah.
Oh, that was from jiu-jitsu. Man, I didn't know you bruise so easily.
I don't.
You obviously do, like. You back on the heroin? Heroin.
Fuck.
Heroin. Welcome back to Sikistan, and you may remember a video we made where we said answering your YouTube questions in the comments, where we answered questions in YouTube comments from an MMA video or a combat sports video, and then we said in the comments of that video you ask your questions and we will blitz through them. So we're going to do two of those right now, and they are from Daniel Clemens and our bald Omni man, not anime man.
He comments on everything.
He sure does. He's
prolific.
Consistent. I've seen him on other videos. I've seen him on Juji Mufu stuff.
Really?
Yeah. Bald Omni man. But I suppose it is anime, so I wasn't incorrect.
Is that anime?
I'm not sure what's not anime. Like, at what point does a cartoon become?
I don't know what anime is.
Cartoons, like, it's big, very big. People love it. People like dress up as their cartoons. People
Pikachu, Pokemon.
People like to bang each other dressed as their cartoons.
No way.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the same thing as furries, but I'm not sure. I'm not here to judge. We'll start with bald Omni man. I've quite an interesting one. I actually wanted to make a video on this at one point. I might do it still in the future, a little more of a high production video. I might call some people, get them on the phone.
Right.
So another separate question for the algorithm. Stiff-legged deadlift versus Romanian deadlift for S&C with range of motion being equalised between the two. Now this is a very interesting question, and it's a huge misnomer. It's a huge mistake in the fitness industry, S&C training as well, bodybuilders in particular, is that the Romanian deadlift was not actually originally intended and was not used for your hamstrings. It was originally used for people's back strength and position in the clean. So in the original Romanian deadlift, and this came from Nicu Vlad when they were in Jim Smith's gym in America doing a seminar, and Nicu Vlad was doing a Romanian deadlift, and they were like, what's that for, or whatever, and he said it's for his clean to mimic those positions. Remember recently we talked about in that video where I talked about the transition from the first to second pull, your knees are a straighter angle in the clean. Well, in the Romanian deadlift we want to mimic that. So instead of sending our hips backwards and putting the load on our hamstrings, in the clean Romanian deadlift what we're actually doing is sending our torso really far forward, and we were putting as much load on our back. And you'll see the difference if you go try this later. If you send your shoulders really far forward instead of moving your hips backwards, you'll feel the load in your back a lot more. Whereas if you send your hips back, you'll feel it on your hamstrings. So technically and nuancedly, if you are doing a Romanian deadlift for your hamstrings, what you're actually doing is a hang stiff-legged deadlift. So it's a below the knee stiff-legged deadlift. So with range of motion being equalized. So if I wanted someone to get their back stronger, if I want to do a particular thing for their back, it would be either back extensions, or we would teach them a correct way of doing Romanian deadlifts. And then if it was hamstrings, usually it starts for us with Nordic falls. Stiff-legged deadlifts sometimes make an appearance. Very often I feel like they're a little bit too neural, kind of. They're a little bit too...
They put a lot of load on the system. I like them for powerlifters.
Yeah, they make an appearance. Usually what we'll do, and especially for athletes, is snatch grip stiff-legged deadlifts or snatch grip RDLs. And that way you'll get a little bit more of the posterior chain work, but the load is way less, so you're not really overloading them, because we can very easy to get kind of less optimal positions with a stiff-legged deadlift, with a heavy one, with enough load to have an impact. So that's kind of what I wanted to say about that, was that the RDL is actually for your back. Now there's nothing wrong with calling an RDL, I don't really care that much, but just letting you know. And then for a stiff-legged deadlift, that would be more for hamstrings, and would mostly be used... I would mostly use it for weightlifters, and it's rare I would actually give it to any of my powerlifters for the stiff-legged deadlift.
I like stiff-legged deadlifts because they're a very good way of making somebody bullshit strong. So there's a lot of time people fall out of training due to the fact that they're just weak. Like they have...
Do you give it to your athletes?
No, they do snatch grip RDLs a lot though.
Yeah.
So like the upper back work as well in the snatch grip RDL, where they really have to stay active. But with making someone bullshit strong, you're basically making them more resilient injury, and a lot of the time you just have to get someone to do these kind of more difficult, more positionally demanding lifts with a fair bit of weight on, to try and give them a small bit more resilience. Like everyone knows, or a lot of people watching this video will probably have gone through this, where you've had training going really well for a while, then you might try and push something, you might try and push volume or push intensity, and then suddenly the wheels come off, your knees get sore, your back gets tight or whatever, then a lot of the time those injuries pop their head up fairly frequently. In those cases, I really do like stiff-legged deadlifts. Getting people to be very, very strong at a stiff-legged deadlift gives them a lot of resilience to handling training load.
One of the little things you should probably be aware of when you're doing stiff-legged deadlifts is if we have a unilateral imbalance from side to side. So if someone has maybe a particularly stronger leg, so something like outside the region of like 5% one side or the other, or if they have a previous issue, if they've maybe collapsed arches or something, what we'll often see is we'll see a very exposed shimmy to one side when people are doing stiff-legged deadlifts. And obviously huge lopsided loading is unlikely to ever be a good thing. Now, I know we get people lately in the old strength training fear where they're like, can you call me research on that? And you're like, I just prefer if my athletes weren't completely fucking loaded to one side. And so the same with this, just watch out for that if you're doing stiff-legged deadlifts, is the loading, it tends to expose that loading on one side to the other frequently with people if they have an issue. Now, if you don't have an issue, it seems to plow ahead fine. But if we see even an upper body issue or a lower body, we might see one shoulder drop a little bit lower. We might see a little bit of twisting, and we might see a little bit lopsided. We might see knees go in one direction. We might see knees go to the right or to the left. It might be very, very subtle, but it's just something I'd watch out for. I definitely wouldn't be loading the stiff-legged deadlifts up like that. If you do see that kind of exposed, I go fix that issue and then, continue on then with stiff-legged deadlifts if it needs be. Okay, second question for this video, and that'll be it. And we'll get to a lot of them, I think, 'cause there's a lot of good questions, but there's a lot about the core, so I'll try to pick this one from Daniel Clemens. He said, hey lads, how would you go about the total volume of core and supplementary exercises? Do you count core at all into, for example, an MRV, or only sub count, or how much you would weigh those main lift vol to sub count vol? Can we write full sentences, lads?
Yeah, I hate the vol.
Whoa, don't write the strong words. Don't try hate out there. There's no need for it.
I dislike the shortening of words. But anyway.
And how do you guys adjust for progress for core, volume, or intensity?
So MRV, like maximum recoverable volume, I like it as a theory. I really do like it. I think a lot of people, particularly in like the aesthetics realms and bodybuilding realms, could learn a lot from it. Obviously, as strength training athletes, your volume is your main variable you're looking at all the time. So it would never be something that you have a strength training athlete who's paying attention to their programming and they don't know what their maximum recoverable volume is. Like that's the number you're looking at all the time. So just on that, I do like MRV as a concept though. But with core work, I tend to just fluctuate frequency more than anything else. The duration of time you're doing core work for can be quite there's quite a large spread. So if you've somebody who is quite a lot of core integrity, right? If Gurf is there and Gurf is your athlete, the amount of time Gurf has to spend on core work per week might be 5 to 10 minutes of fairly concentrated core work 3 to 4 times a week. And that will keep him tipping away all of his other lifts. So all of his accessory work, all of his main lifts are adding into that kind of core volume and making sure his core stays strong. And he really doesn't have to donate that much frequency, that much duration, and that much kind of recoverable volume to the core work itself. If you have somebody who's a developing athlete, female athlete, lighter weight class athlete, all the things that Gurf isn't, then a lot more of that time comes into it. And rather than me thinking about it as volume, where you might say moderate volume would be 5 by 5, 3 by 5, 5 by 3, something around there would be considered moderate. Because of the kind of range of core work and the range of isometrics versus concentrics versus eccentric work, I tend to just donate time. So I will say this athlete's doing 10 to 12, 15 minutes of core work 5 times a week, 4 times a week, 3 times a week. And that tends to be kind of how I do it.
So I would think if you're looking like how do you progress them, how do you adjust for volume or whatever, think about core work as in certain standards, and you just need to get to those standards and then just maintain that through the minimum amount of effort you need to put in to maintain that particular performance and those metrics. You can go beyond those, but it doesn't seem, from what we've seen, it doesn't seem to be that valuable. You can certainly do it, and it's not really negatively affected the athletes like adaptation energy or how much fatigue they'll accrue. It's just kind of wasting time, like Fitz is saying. So if you think about core work across time rather than sets and reps, A certain volume of time will get you to a particular performance level. I mean, once you get to this particular performance level, just you need to maintain that. Whatever it is you think you need to do to maintain that is the most important thing. Going beyond that then will require more time, and it just doesn't seem to be that productive. We don't see any huge benefits once you get to, for example, we like to see things like if you can hold a 15-second starfish plank either side, then you're very, very close, example, for what like lateral or oblique core work we'd be looking to get you to do. So if you can do that for 2 or 3 sets, do that like 2 or 3 times a week, and that's a lot of it covered. If you can hold an arms overhead extended plank for like 30 seconds, that's quite a good standard. Then when we get into like really specific stuff, so depending on your sport or your particular needs, we might have stuff like weighted sit-ups, we might have payloft press. Usually if you're getting stuff like that, there's kind of a performance goal, or there's like an endpoint with that, so they will be progressed and loaded like other exercises. So for general people, for general training without a very specific need, it's usually a particular performance metric. Usually it's like 15 seconds, 20 seconds, pretty casual starfish side plank, arms overhead plank are usually things. They're usually a good indicator of other areas of performance. So it's not necessarily that these are the best to do, or those ones are particularly the best to do, but they're just a great sign. So surprised how often you'll see an athlete who can squat like north of 200 kilos, and then if they're a side plank and it's like fucking like we've got 5 seconds barely holding it, and the opposite side then they might not be able to do any period of time. So usually that's kind of what we're aiming for, a particular performance metric, maintaining that metric, and then beyond that then it doesn't really matter that much. You could technically do core work every day, unweighted core work, and have no issue. And maybe if we had someone like combat sports athletes or whatever, you could do that every day and get a little bit more value than other athletes might get from it, or especially strength training athletes. But for like maybe jiu-jitsu or judo or wrestling, you could probably keep on top of that and make sure you're getting 100% of that kind of neurological readiness and priming with your particular core musculature. But for everyone else then, squat, bench and deadlift like 2-3 times a week, getting to a particular standards of metrics, and then just kind of leave it there.
Yeah, we'll probably do a separate video on those standards and prerequisites that we like people to get to before they progress on, because it's definitely been asked in the comments before. The last thing I will say about core work is, if you take, there's different tiers of priority for like weightlifters, powerlifters, strength athletes or whatever, and number 1 is your competition lifts. So if weightlifters, your snatch, your clean and jerk, underneath that then you have your strength lifts or your like classical strength lifts and accessories. Then you might have slightly more specialized accessory work, and then you have core work at the end. In terms of your taper, so the last 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 days of your competition, the core work is usually the first thing that gets pulled out. So you obviously don't pull the classical strength work out straight away. Your specific accessory work probably doesn't get pulled out straight away because that's there for a very specific reason. But the core work does tend to go astray or go missing in your last kind of 2 weeks, or your last as you go into a taper towards competition.
And all our main programs have core work, just in case you're wondering, because we do sell them. Okay, thanks, bye.